All right, good morning and welcome to our first service on Sunday morning. We have two services, the first of which is the Bible prophecy update that we do weekly. And then our second service is actually the sermon, which is a verse-by-verse study through the Word of God. We're currently in the book of Hebrews, and today we're in chapter 12. We left off last week in verse 17. We're going to pick it up in verse 18, and Lord willing, make it through to verse 24. And we're going to look at the dangers of legalism, specifically as it relates to the reasons that there's actually a temptation and even a seduction to go backwards into it. And this is what the writer of Hebrews is writing about in our text today, and that will be live streamed at 11:15 a.m. Hawaii time today. Also, for those of you that are watching by way of YouTube or Facebook, we want to encourage you to go directly to jdfarag.org. There you will find the uncensored and uninterrupted entirety of today's update. So with that, let's get right to it. I want to talk with you today about how it is and why it is that the handwriting is on the wall, which is actually a biblical idiom, specifically concerning that which is now seemingly imminent prophetically. Actually, it's kind of interesting. The secular world, as they've been known to do, has hijacked this from the Word of God. I know Arabs shouldn't use the word hijack, but for lack of a better one, if you prefer stolen, so many things that the world takes from the Word of God, and this is one of them, they completely took this idiom and define it as a sign that something catastrophic is imminent. So when you hear that expression, the handwriting's on the wall, ooh, you know what's coming. The origin of this is from the book of Daniel, and it's the account that we have recorded for us in Daniel chapter 5, when King Belshazzar has this great feast there in Babylon. And he ends up blaspheming God by using the vessels that they had taken from the temple in Jerusalem when they had taken the Jews captive into Babylon. So picture the scene with me here in Daniel 5. There they are. This is a huge feast. In fact, some of the archaeological digs there in ancient Babylon have uncovered these huge, enormous banquet halls that could facilitate literally thousands of people, and this was one of those places. And they are partying, they are getting drunk. I don't mean to get graphic, but certainly they're partying and drinking was riddled with debauchery and sexual immorality. And we're told in the account that as they're drinking their wine, they're also praising their gods. And we have those gods listed for us. They're the false gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. And here they are drinking and getting very drunk and partying and all kinds of debauchery. Then all of a sudden, again, picture this scene with me. Out of nowhere, fingers of a hand appear. Boy, that'll kill a party right there, yeah? They all watch this now, of course, as you might imagine. And this hand begins writing on the wall opposite where the lampstand was so that it's well lit. And interesting, we're told this detail in the narrative that King Belshazzar became so fearful that his knees literally began to knock against each other. That's how much fear filled him. So, what does he do? Well, he calls for his astrologers and soothsayers and shows them this handwriting on the wall, but they're unable to understand it, let alone interpret it. When the queen hears about this, she goes to King Belshazzar and tells him to call on Daniel. And then she says this about him. Listen to this. In whom is the Spirit of the Holy God? Oh, would to God that we would be numbered amongst those of whom it could be said, in them is the Spirit of the Holy God. There's a fascinating account in Acts chapter 14 where Peter and John are speaking boldly with authority, teaching the scriptures. And everybody there is just blown away. And they marveled and they're puzzled because these are just ordinary men. They're not learned in the scriptures, and yet listen to what they're saying. And then we're told in the text that then they realized that these men had been with Jesus. Oh, would to God that we would also be numbered amongst those of whom it would be said, these men, these people have been with Jesus. Well, they go and get Daniel. He's brought before the king, but he doesn't interpret it right away. He first, and rightfully so, tells the king that he's guilty of exalting himself, lifting himself up against the Lord of heaven in using these vessels from the temple of the Lord. And then he goes on to tell him that he has not glorified the God who, get this, and I love this, holds his very breath in his hand. Think about that. Here's this king that has exalted himself, and the God that holds that next breath. Everybody breathe right now, because right now I just stopped breathing by default. That very next breath you're going to take, guess who holds that breath in his hand? God does. And this God that holds your next breath in your hand, King, you have not glorified him. Truth be made known, you've blasphemed him. And then he proceeds to interpret the handwriting on the wall. And we pick it up in verse 25 of Daniel 5. And this is the inscription that was written. Many, many tekel ufarsin. This, verse 26, is the interpretation of each word. Many. God has numbered your kingdom and finished it. Tekel. You have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Peres. Your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and Persians. Then, we're told, Belshazzar gave the command, and they clothed Daniel with purple and put a chain of gold around his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom, which Daniel had already said he was not interested in. It's verse 30 that I want to draw your attention to, because it's going to be germane to our understanding. That very night, that very night, Belshazzar, king of the Chaldeans, was slain. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, being about 62 years old. Okay, why do I want to start out this way? Because the parallels of this account are eerily similar to what's happening in the world today. I'll even take it a step further and say, in some ways, it's exactly what's happening today. Namely, that of God numbering this final evil kingdom of man and finishing it by virtue of how this world has been weighed in the balances and found wanting. And as such, the world is now divided like never before, I might add. And like with Belshazzar, who was slain that very night, so too is Jesus coming as a thief in the night. If you'll kindly allow me to, I want to, for the remainder of our time together today, expound on how it is that the handwriting is on the wall. And now it's just a matter of time.